So my name's David. I'm nearly 60 and I grew up in care in the sort of 60s, 70s and 80s. And I've got some photographs which I'm going to just kind of put on to kind of prompt me. But the most important thing is to start at the beginning. I was born to a Nigerian man and an English woman. And that was in Hampshire. And my dad was working in the local hospital. My mum was working there. They were together for about a year, but by the time I was born, they'd split up. There was a lot of racism, and I'm going to be honest, on both sides. My Nigerian family were telling my dad that he shouldn't marry an English girl, and my English family were telling my mum she shouldn't marry an African man. So that's where my life began. I was put into, has anybody heard the term farmed out? Yeah. So I was put into a private foster home, which was paid for by both my parents. They both paid a little bit each month, and this white family in Chelmsford looked after me. I'm not exactly sure, but I think for about 2 years. My mum subsequently met a man who told her not to pay for that nigger child anymore. So my mum stopped paying, and the family went to the local authority, which was Essex, and I was taken into care. Let me just see if I can operate this. Yeah, okay. So like a lot of people in care, I don't have very many photographs of me as a child, and I think you're being spoiled today because you're getting to see pretty much all of them. Like a lot of kids in the care system, this is my dad. So this must have been a trip on the way to Chelmsford, I think my dad told me, where they'd gone to pick me up. Actually, I had a conversation with somebody outside because there's a lot going on today around racism and all that. And I will tell you that my mum was spat at, called nigger lover and all sorts of things. So it wasn't a pleasant experience for my mum. This was me. Somebody sent me this photograph a few years ago. I didn't have any photographs of me as a toddler. And someone sent me that photograph. So I was then taken from the private foster home to live in a small family group home in Basildon in Essex. And I will say that you see this young lady here. I recently met up with her. In fact, it's her birthday today, and we've been speaking this morning. I lost contact with her for years, but she happened to live behind a friend of mine, and she saw me in his garden, and that's how we re-established contact. So it was a small family group home run by a matriarchal type lady called Auntie Betty. It was a very tightly run ship. It was the most settled that I'd ever been in my life. If I look back now and I think of all the placements I had, I was there for about 8 years. And to all intents and purposes, everything was fine. I don't think I had a lot of problems at school because I was one of the only black kids in the school. But apart from that, everything was kind of running along smoothly until, we get these trends in social work. And all of a sudden, people like Auntie Betty went out of favour. And what they wanted was professionally trained, educated, university educated people to come and run children's homes. So Auntie Betty was asked to leave, which was completely devastating for me. It was like taking my mum away. And I reacted to that. My behaviour reacted to that. And I was eventually excluded from primary school. I think it was for biting a teacher. But there were lots of other issues in the school. I believe that had I been at school now, people would have been a bit more understanding of the pressure I was under as a young black kid living in care in an area where there were very few black people. I think there'd be more understanding around that now. But Battleswick really was an idyllic place for me to be. The local Fords, it was a Fords town. And Ford Social Club used to take us out on day trips. I've got lots of fond memories of going to Holiday on Ice, the London Palladium, Butlins holiday camps, and all that paid for by the local community. These aren't coming out very well, these pictures, are they? I'm afraid. But these are some pictures of me at school in my primary school. So what happened to me when I was excluded from primary school? I was sent to, that's Battleswick, which is the the name of the children's home that I was brought up in. Obviously, that anybody who's been brought up in children's homes, you always remember the name of the home. It kind of sticks in your head. And that's, in fact, I took my son recently to go and see the building because I wanted him to have an understanding of my childhood. So I was then sent to a maladjusted school. Now, you can actually, it does actually come up in a spell check now. But I remember when another thing that a lot of young people in care learn to do is to read upside down, because there's always papers in front of somebody when they're talking to you. And I'll be honest with you, stamped on the top of all my pieces of paper when I was a kid was illegitimate. That was they had a stamp for that, right? That they would stamp on the top of documents that would let everybody know that you were illegitimate. So things like that, you know, you learn as you grow up. I can remember reading upside down for a long time. It was, I went off the rails, I bit a teacher, I was excluded, I was sent to a maladjusted school. I'm telling you, that was the most scariest experience of my life. And I can remember when my social worker took me up on the way back, crying all the way back, saying, please don't send me to that school. I know that all the bad kids in my town are sent to that school and I don't want to go there. It was a frightening place. There were kids there with emotional problems, probably mental health issues, and we were all just put into this boarding school and kind of left to rot. In fact, if it hadn't have been for my father pushing for me to get back into mainstream education, I think I probably would have stayed there and had a really awful experience, educational experience. And this was me when I was, anybody heard of intermediate treatment? That was a project that I think was really useful to a lot of kids when I was young. So intermediate treatment was a way of kind of getting young people and diverting them away from crime. You might read stories about it in the Sun newspaper, kids sent on holidays and jaunts and day trips and all this sort of stuff. Well, these are kids who might not necessarily get day trips through their families. So it was a really important part for me. This photograph here is of me on my first foreign holiday. That's a Freddie Laker plane. Anybody remember Freddie Laker? And to get me to go on this trip was a real challenge because I was going out of the country and I was going with a school friend. And this is me as a teenager, and I'm just trying to get onto a picture of my social worker, which is coming up, and which is, you know, why I'm really keen to talk to social workers. So this is my social worker, Jenny. Jenny became my social worker when I was 8 years old. I was one of 25 cases I think she took on when she first became a social worker. And Jenny and I have been in touch all of my adult life. In fact, we've even done training sessions where we go together to talk to groups of social workers about our relationship, about how she managed that, and how difficult it was for her often. For that trip for me to go to Italy, she was fobbed off by the department. I didn't have a passport. And in the end, she sat down outside the director's office and said, I'm not moving until someone comes and sees me. That's the kind of social worker I had. And I was really lucky for that, because the other thing that she got me involved in from the age of 14, she set up a local Who Cares group. Now, Who Cares groups were mainly kind of run by adults, but, you know, youngsters were involved to come in. We would write letters to the Director of Social Services. We would have meetings with him. I remember we used to, in a piss-takey kind of way, call him Dad, just to wind him up. But we used to go to meetings in his office and make demands about pocket money, about staying overnight at friends, about going on school trips and all those kind of things. So I started to get involved in that from a very early age. And I was involved in the National Association of Young People in Care. Unfortunately, and I have to talk about this, when I was 15, I was sent to live on my own on one of the roughest estates in my town, in it was derelict house before we were given it, and 4 young people who were in care were living in that house. I never missed a day of school. In fact, I used to like going into school just to wind the teachers up and be cheeky and all those kind of things. But I never missed a day of school, but that was another really difficult part of my life. I would go to school, I would come home, I didn't have any food in the house, I hardly had any clothes, I was getting really small allowance every week from the local authority. Somebody was meant to come down and see us at least once a week. Sometimes that didn't happen. And obviously I was complete free agent. I was glue sniffing at the time, really serious glue sniffer all the way through my teenage years. And I can tell you why I did that. I mean, I did that because I hated my life and I wanted an escape. And this was the easiest way for me to kind of lose myself. So I started glue sniffing. I started stealing cars. I would break into the swimming pool and go swimming in the middle of the night. Just all sorts of nonsense. And I carried that on. I was given a flat at 18. But by the time I was 18, the police caught up with us. And once they got my fingerprints, they got me for an awful lot of crimes. And I will say that they wrote off a lot of crimes through us. I mean, there were loads of charges that came up that I knew nothing about, but apparently I was charged with, and I agreed to take the charge, apparently. So I ended up going to Borstal, which is not a different experience for a lot of people who have been through the care system. I will say, if I'd have been looked after properly between 15 and 18, that would not have happened. That would not have happened. I'm not a criminal. I've never done, apart from smoking a few joints when I was younger, I've never really done anything criminal as an adult. So it wasn't that was what I was. It was just that was what I was forced to be. I can remember, we're all hearing about shoplifting now, but I can remember shoplifting all of my clothes from the co-op because that meant that I had more money for food. My dad showed me some letters that from me at that age, begging him for £20 because I had no food. Right. So this is a situation that young people are still in today. But the reason why I stopped on that photograph is because when I was in prison, I started going out to local schools and talking to them and telling them what it was like to be in prison, you know, Borstal, as a way of discouraging them. And I discovered voluntary work. And I realized that when I came out of prison, that I had to prove myself now, because not only did I have a care background, but I had a criminal record. I think I had about 800 charges on my criminal record. In fact, when I get asked for my CRB now, you know, it was that in huge pages. So I discovered voluntary work. I started to do voluntary work, and I found a purpose. I first of all started working with severely disabled people in a residential establishment. And then in 1984, which is 40 years ago, in October, I helped set up the Black and in Care conference, which was held in London in 1984. It was a huge thing. I don't think anybody had addressed the issues of black kids in care before that. There was a black social workers group with David Devine and a few other people involved who had tried to raise some of the issues. But we organised a conference, and young people came from all around the country to attend this conference. We got a lot of terrible press. I can remember us being called racist because we didn't want white social workers in the meeting. We wanted it to be for young people to talk about themselves and for them not to hold back. And, you know, national press were calling us racists and stuff like that. So it was quite a challenging time for us. But we produced the report, and we then went on with Sean Gagan, who is quite a respected ex-care person. We made a film with some of the people from the conference called Black and in Care. And I spent a lot of time going around, taking the reports out to people, playing the video, talking to social workers, and trying to address some of the issues that we'd raised within the film and the report. And, you know, it hadn't been done before, and it was a new thing. And, you know, for somebody who has kind of campaigned all of their life, well, certainly since I was 14, that's Lem Cisse, that was around the time of the conference. So, you know, there were lots of really important people from the care system involved in it, Carol from Coventry and so on. But one of the rules with NAPIC and Black and in Care was that once you got to 25, you were seen to be too far from the system to be involved. So NAPIC workers all ended their jobs when they were 25. And because I'd made the film, Black and in Care, and I'd gone on to make a few more films with Sean, I got an interest and a passion in journalism. And I wanted to use journalism to kind of tell my story and other people's stories. And so I was really lucky. I kept on applying to the BBC, and they kept on telling me to apply to black programs. And I said, no, I want to just kind of come in like everybody else. And eventually I got a job as a trainee assistant producer in what was called topical features. And I produced I was a researcher then. I worked on a program called Kilroy. And Kilroy had to find 60 people 5 days a week to discuss topical issues. And I really came into my own, because all of the other people who were working were mainly 27. They'd been to university, they'd had a couple of years off. Usually they were wealthy, they came from good families, they didn't really have to work, but they chose working in the media as a kind of play job. So I was working with people like that, and literally on my intake, every single other person was Oxbridge, and I was the only one who wasn't. And when we started working on Kilroy, I realized that these people had no idea about the real world. If they wanted to find a real person, they would have to phone a social worker or a probation officer or this or that or a youth club or whatever. Me, I'd have people coming over to me. Do you know a one-legged lesbian who hates men? Yeah, I know someone like that. And I would inevitably go and find them. And I literally was working on all the teams. And one of the first things I did, do you remember Lockerbie? Everybody remember Lockerbie? So I was really proud that on the Kilroy from Lockerbie that I managed to get a black man on. And, as a black man, that was really important to me that I got a black man. Not only was he there, but he was the local pharmacist. And he'd been out there doing all he could to help people. And, I found that quite powerful to be able to get these people on television whose voices we never heard. This was an event I organised at the BBC for Who Cares magazine. In fact, I should say that I was part of the original Who Cares editorial team. Was involved in it for a long, long time. And I put an event at the BBC where we invited care leavers and people in care to come and spend a day at the BBC. This guy used to be on that slide. This is Lucy Pilkington, who was on the Clothes Show. She was actually adopted. So I managed to, when I was at the BBC, I used to get loads of people in through the door, especially those who are looked after, working class, wouldn't have got through the door. In fact, the woman on reception, if anyone came into White City and just, I'm looking for a job, I think I want to work for the BBC, she'd call me and I'd come down and I'd either, take them up to the office and show them about. And I've got a few young people, well, they're older now, who I'm still in contact with, who I managed to get into the BBC. But one of the things that I did while I was there was I made lots of films about care. I felt that television was a really powerful medium and a really good way of telling stories. So I would get involved in a lot of the current affairs programs. I mean, one of the reasons why I left broadcasting was because I realized that actually you can make these programs, there's an immediate impact, and then everything dies away. I did a lot of programs around young girls in the care system being groomed all over the country. I did it for Real Story, 4x4, and a few other programs because I really cared passionately about this. And I was really angry that even after having Fiona Bruce present a 7:30 p.m., main broadcasting time, that actually nothing was done about it. We know that this has been going on for years. In my children's home, there were always men outside in cars who young women would go off with, and nobody even tried to stop them from leaving the building. All the staff knew what was going on, and it was never something that was stopped. And so that was me collecting. I did a film about black men and mental health as well. Again, I realized that from the care system, a lot of men were leaving. And in fact, the reason why I did that film was because one of my foster sons, his best friend, had murdered somebody at Turnpike Lane tube station. And the man, Tony, had been in my house 2 days before. I knew there was something wrong with him, but I was too scared to contact mental health services and I spoke to his ex-social worker as well, and we both agreed that if we contacted mental health services, they were going to just drug him up. I really regret that because Tony stabbed this woman to death. I then made a film. I did the first ever interview inside Rampton Hospital with Tony. because I thought it was really important to tell his care journey, his story, and I'm really proud of that film. I organised for 15 black men with mental health services to come to the Africa Centre to sit around and have a discussion about what was going on in their lives and how they were being affected. So I'm really proud of the work that I did in the media, but I think I just got to the point where I realised, you know what, you can make as many documentaries as you want, things aren't going to change. And again, so this is Jenny at her 40th. I've got lots of photographs of us at each other's birthdays, so I just wanted to include that. And I must tell you, I've always bought Jenny really special presents for her birthday and for Christmas, because when I was a kid, literally the only decent presents I got when I was a kid were from Jenny. So all my adult life, if she sees a coat she wants, we'll get it. And that's the way it was for a long time. I also got involved in a lot of projects. In the year 2000, I got the BBC to second me to go and work in a special school for kids in care. It was a boarding school, to make a film with the youngsters there. And again, I'm still in contact. Oh, I should tell you actually, I'm still in contact with these two. This one, you know, sometimes when you're in care, you hear about people who end up in really notorious cases. Unfortunately, that one there ended up in a really notorious case in Northampton, which was heavily reported by the press. So, you know, over my life, I've tried to do as much as I can. I've fostered or mentored or whatever you call it, at least 20 young people who I'm still in touch with. Most of them, there's a couple of them that are not around anymore. Now, this photograph is really important to me because this is my mum, this is Jenny, and this is my brother's child, so my nephew. And I think that photograph means a lot to Jenny as well, because Jenny met my mum when I was 14. But unfortunately, she came back with bad news, which is that I couldn't see her. And I couldn't see her because she had a family and she didn't want to destroy that family. I think she married a racist man as well. So I think she was worried about what he might say. But when I was 27 and all of her children were grown up, my mum looked for me. She came and looked for me. And I just tell you that when you're a kid in care and you don't have parents, you fantasize. And I'm not going to apologize for that because I think that got me through my childhood. And so I should tell you what my fantasy was about my mum and dad. This is really hilarious. I'll tell you why, because I did a documentary years ago and went back to my hometown and people still believe the stories that I told them. Oh, is your dad still a diplomat? Is your mum still a stunt woman in America? And I had to tell them on camera because they were filming, and this woman said to me, oh, is your mum still a stunt woman? And I said, I had to tell them it's not true. And in fact, actually, my dad was kind of like a diplomat. He did go and work for the Ministry of Health in Nigeria. And another ironic story about my dad is my dad trained social workers. My dad was the dean of the faculty at the University of East Anglia and the Chelmer Institute. And one day he phoned me up and said, oh, David, I want to book you to come and talk to my social workers. And so I went along and talked to his social worker. And while I'm talking, one said, you know, your name is exactly the same as the guy who runs this course. You couldn't make that up, right? You could not make that up. And, you know, in a way, I'm very angry at the way they treated my dad. My mum gave me up. I didn't meet her until I was 27. My dad was always there. Okay, so there are a lot of stories that I get fed by social workers that he didn't turn up a lot of the time, or he'd say he was coming and he didn't come. And there's lots of, even old teachers remember me sitting on the school gate saying, no, I'm waiting for my dad. He's going to come today. And he didn't come. But he did write a lot and he did keep in touch with me and he did care about me. And we did make up. I spent all of my teenage years very angry with my dad. In fact, my dad thought he'd been attacked by the National Front once because somebody had daubed loads of black paint over a new car he had. That was me. I was so angry that he had a new car and I had no food and I wasn't being looked after that I got myself on a train. I went to Leyland, I think it was, bought a tin of paint and went and threw it all over his car. And literally the next time I spoke to David, the National Front attacked me. They're throwing all paint all over my car. And anyway, he didn't even know I was in Borstal. My dad was such an upstanding person that I couldn't even tell him that I was in Borstal. There was an opportunity for me to go home at 14, and I'm really angry that the local authority was so racist that they didn't allow me to go back home. And I'll tell you how they made their judgment. My dad lived the house. We still own the house in a cul-de-sac in Purley, in middle class, leafy England. He was a professor. His wife is a doctor. They had a piano in the dining room. You know, it was a middle class household. But social workers who came and visited made a judgment. When they saw my brother and sister behaving so badly, when they saw them behaving so well, they actually wrote in my file that they think there's physical punishment going on in the house, although they didn't see any. I'm friends with my brother and sister now. My dad never laid a finger on them. Never laid a finger on them. They're just really good kids. So I'm really angry because I think if I'd have gone home at 14, bearing in mind I stayed on into sixth form whilst I was in care and I went to college, which was unheard of. I mean, my local authority didn't know what to do with me when I said I want to go to college. They really didn't know what to do with me. And the idea of a young person in care going to university in those days was pretty much, unless you had someone really fighting your corner, it wasn't going to happen. And I think it was free in those days, but you needed the local authority to support you, you know, through the living bit of it. I've got about 10 minutes left, so let me just keep going. Now, one of the reasons why I called my talk Round and Around is because I believe that we do go round and around. I believe that we are still campaigning and asking for the same things that we asked for in 1984. I went to the is to say that we are going around and round. The whole care system is completely fragmented now. It's not the system it used to be. I hate profiting from children's social care. I mean, I know you've all got your mortgages to pay and you need a salary. I know that. But what I don't like is I don't like all of these children's homes that are being run for profit. I think it's really wrong. When you see how much money is made in profit, you have to wonder, should that have been spent on the children? I hate local authorities for giving up residential care. I think they should have. I know that in the 80s there were big problems and I suffered abuse whilst I was in care. Local authorities settled out of court, so I didn't even get a chance to tell the story, which is really annoying because there's lots of people like me who your lawyer will just tell you settle out of court, because at the end of the day, if they offer you something less than you know, it becomes a thing about money. And what I wanted was for it to be told publicly and for it to be reported on, because we're not hearing enough about what happened to people like me in the 80s. We had a recent review into the future of children's social care. What a load of crap. I mean, seriously, you know, 2 billion we were asking for from that, and we were offered 200 million. It's a joke. You know, you've neglected the care system so badly that I see on Twitter, young people are being moved all over the country, away from their friends, away from their family. I mean, Kent, the county of Kent are so peed off with the amount of looked after children who get sent there that they're now campaigning, the council are campaigning for other local authorities not to send their children there. You know, it really is a bad situation out there. And I think because the system is so fragmented, that's why it's very difficult to change the system. I'm really disappointed that we didn't get, I mean, I got involved in that review. There are a couple of times when I really just wanted to leave because I just thought, but I just thought I had to, if I got offered a place there, I had to be there because they had to hear my voice. And, you know, really disappointing. Josh, whose report it was or whatever, is now an MP. So I'm hoping that with his influence now as a member of parliament, that some of the things that were talked about in that review will be carried on by a Labour government. I mean, let's forget, we've had 14 years of Conservatives who have stripped youth clubs, probation, you know, just so many things now are a mess. And I just think that it's going to take at least, you know, and I'm not party political, I didn't vote Labour this time, but, you know, it's going to take a long time to sort this out, but it needs a national commitment. And I don't think the review got that. I don't think the review got that, and I'm really sad about that because I feel like I wasted my time. So, you know, going forward, I think the care system needs a lot of attention, and it needs good people to be. I don't think you'll find many social workers like my Jenny now. I think that social workers have been beaten down by management to just kind of get on with their caseloads. You know, for years I've been hearing about social workers complaining about sitting in front of screens, when some of the best time I had with Jenny was when she was taking me to a needlecraft fair or something like that in her car, which she often used to take me to. And I would be sitting in the car and we would talk about everything. And if there was something about that, a lot of social workers said that those little car journeys were really important because you're not standing opposite someone, you're sitting next to them. And actually, sometimes that's a good way to kind of have conversations with people. And social workers just don't have time to do that anymore. So I'm really seriously, I've never been so concerned for looked after children than I am right now. And I've been campaigning since I was 14. I would hate to be a child in care right now. I think that would be the most awful position to be in. There's no continuity. Nobody wants to, you might have a change of social workers, change of accommodation. All of these things are terrible. The fact that Jenny's known me since I was 8 years old is really important to our relationship. And I hope that you as social workers can build those relationships with young people and work on, I know you're working for the state and for the government and for the council, but actually your job is to do your best for that young person or that child. And that's what I want to inspire you to do, is to think about how you can do that in a way in today's environment. And I think it's going to be challenging for you. I think if you really care about the people you're working with, I think that your job will be a challenge. I think if you're going to willing to put on a jacket every day, go into job, do the job and go home, I don't think I know very many social workers who leave the job at work. You know, some of the things you have to witness, some of the things you have to experience are played over in your mind. But I know that of all the people who have looked after me, the best ones have been the ones that have shown me that they really do care. And that does mean getting me a personalized birthday card, not just out of the box that they leave in the office, generic ones. If you know I'm into football, which I'm not, you get me a football one, and all that sort of stuff. So I want to inspire you to be good social workers, and I want to inspire you to be like Jenny. That's it. Thank you very much.